Love to hear all these questions. It's neat to see that everybody shares our energy and passion for this. If you haven't noticed, we love talking about this. This is what we love to do, and we're just to kind of ground us in where we're at in this whole process. Remember, we said it's confusing, it's complicated, but we want to keep it to be systematic and simplified. So, what we just talked about. That Kyle went through these case studies with, these excellent, just real world case studies, was about individual readiness and durability, meaning we're looking at doing the functional movement screen, we're looking at doing the selective functional movement assessment, and that's what it looks like there. But we've got a lot of other considerations through this whole person that I think was probably the biggest mistake that I've made and that I see being made is we have to consider these other things. We have to consider load management. We have to consider performance readiness. What does it look like for a specific warm up? And does a pitcher need something additional or different? And then what does recovery, what does restoration look like? And what does development look like? What does performance look like? And being very specific on this. And I don't mean to overwhelm us with this information, but it is more about, hey, let's be comprehensive here. So I want to take you through maybe kind of a high level look at some snapshots of these different things. Load and capacity. I think that if I see anything that really can tear down an athlete, tear down their performance more than anything else, is not monitoring and measuring load and capacity. So we kind of think about that load. That load is the amount of stress that's placed on the body, and that's commonly thought as the number of tennis matches in a weekend, or number of pitches thrown, or innings pitched. Then we also have to think of the other side of it, which is capacity. And the capacity is the amount of something that something can produce or something can handle. And we have to manage both of these things. We have to manage not only the load, but we have to manage the capacity. And I think we tend to focus more on increasing someone's capacity so that they can handle a load. And that's good and important, but if we don't handle the load well, it's not going to go well. So if we continue in the baseball theme, and if you notice, a lot of this is baseball specific, but we can just go right into volleyball or tennis or other overhead sports. But baseball specific, we know the research is very clear: pitch count, pitch velocity, innings per appearance, total innings pitched. That all affects load and is really important. So load is throws performed outside of game situations, and this happens a lot, whether it's through the warm-up, weighted ball sessions, long toss, bullpens, flat ground sessions, all of this. And the interesting thing about this study is only 12% of throws actually occurred in the game. And this slide to me is what says it all, that if load is not managed, it does not matter what I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, but it really is kind of like a drop in the ocean of when we're doing arm care and range of motion and movement and recovery. If load is too high, if load is exceeding capacity, we can only increase capacity so much and manage that end of it. We have to understand and be able to monitor and manage load. And that's a pro tip for you. You have to have a complete understanding of load management. What is for the age? What are the number of pitches that can be thrown? How does it look? Do you go play catcher after you pitch? Do you play shortstop after you pitch? Or do you go to third base? What does that all look like? And is it age dependent? So we really need to focus on that, because the research on this is really neat. When looking at a simulated game, actually throwing 60 pitches, immediately what we see is there's a 12% decrease in cuff strength and a 16% decrease in internal rotation range of motion. And they monitored these pitchers and throwers over a 4-day period, and it took, by ultrasound imaging and through range of motion measurements, it took until day 4 to normalize. And so what we have to get into the concept is, how can we accelerate that normalization, and how can we be sure that it has normalized? Because what we see is we have to, when we talk about load, remember we have acute load, which is in a single day or a single week, and chronic load, which is over a longer period of time. We have to manage both of those. The number one thing that we see is, okay, you lose a little bit of internal rotation. Let's say you lose 5 degrees in an outing that hasn't been restored. Probably not a big deal in going into your next outing. But then your next outing, you lose 5 more, and you get this downward cascade, and it gets really bad really fast. So what I want to think about is another concept, so that's going to help us understand both load as well as restoration, is if we look at EMG 24 hours after a pitching outing, at rest, the EMG is at 85% of max contraction. So just sitting there, it is that contracted. So that's what our main focus needs to be from a restoration perspective, is restoring that tissue quality. So